Going out on your own in athletic training or being an entrepreneur hasn't always been a huge option for everybody, but more so people are getting creative and figuring out ways around it. A lot of things depend on your licensure act and different things that come into play there. But in this interview, we talked to Todd Sabol, who has ventured out into that entrepreneurial world. And so we talk about some of the things that he did, has to consider, and also some of the challenges he's had with that, which has been really kind of interesting to hear, and also some of the things he's trying to figure out now to venture back out as he's moved around a little bit. So, really interesting episode when it comes to entrepreneurship and athletic training and trying to kind of expand what the options are for us as athletic trainers to do in the profession. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Please check them out. Reach out to them with ideas, and they're always looking for feedback when it comes to their kits, their braces, or whatever it may be. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on today with Todd Sabol, who is an athletic trainer that has really ventured out into the entrepreneurship world. Done a little bit of digging around from what I can find on the interwebs about what he's up to. It looks fascinating, and I'm definitely excited to hear more about this, and I have lots of questions of just getting started, working around licensure stuff and all that. It just
Mhm.
I've talked to a few people, and this seems to be a trend that might be coming more and more, which is exciting. And you're on the forefront of that, so it's always interesting to hear that. But before I keep rambling, I wanted to turn it over to you and just allow you to introduce yourself, fill in who you are, what you've done, and how you got to where you are currently.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I always enjoy, what on various platforms getting on and talking shop and especially talking about this topic as well. So, like you said, my name's Todd Sabol. I'm an athletic trainer from Ohio. If anybody's familiar with the Akron area, I usually just kind of say I'm from where LeBron's from, just to make it easy for people. Um, so we're real close to that area. Um, I have probably a pretty similar story that most athletic trainers do. I grew up playing sports, was plagued with some injuries, when I was younger, but was blessed with an awesome athletic training staff, some great physical therapists that really helped me get through, just some really tough times, not just physically, but mentally as well. And that kind of really got me on the track of, hey, I want to do this for people when I grew up too. So that's how I really got started with my passion for the field. Didn't really do too much with it in high school. We just didn't really have, any kind of like elective courses or whatever to take, but I definitely had the interest. So I went to Marietta College, which is in Southeast Ohio, like right on the border of Ohio and West Virginia.
Okay.
For undergrad, got my bachelor's degree in athletic training. I played soccer there as well while I was there for 4 years. So it was kind of cool. I got to see, in the fall I was on the athlete side, and some of my classmates were our student athletic trainers, and then in the spring I was on the other end of things and doing all that. So it was pretty cool just to kind of see at the collegiate level, kind of be on both sides of that. And then in grad school, I got my master's in athletic training as well at OU, Ohio University. And I worked at a high school full time during my schooling. Really kind of fell in love with the secondary setting while I was there. Did my thesis on functional evaluation for the lower extremity, which I'm pretty passionate about as well. I still do quite a bit with that in terms of my
Okay.
business and just stuff every day in terms of like how I evaluate, and I use that stuff literally on a daily basis.
Sure.
Um, and then while I was there, like you kind of alluded to, I was able to start my own business. Really for the simple fact that I got extremely lucky. The original concept fell straight into my lap just by a stroke of luck, and then I kind of um, branched off of that to where I'm doing more of the actually stuff in the gym, athletic training, injury rehab services. But it all originated from sports medicine coaching seminars for coaches in Ohio to help get them certifications they need to coach. in Ohio. So that's a real brief intro, but I'm sure we can kind of get into a little bit more things along those lines.
Yeah, and that background helps a little bit because when I was looking online at your website, which sports med discussion, or
Sports med discussion, yeah, it's kind of a mouthful.
yeah, I didn't want to do a disservice, but
Yeah, no, it's
I
all
like the
right.
name.
Thanks.
And even on there, it had some of the what it looked like hands-on things that you were doing, the pictures and some of the things you offered, but then it was a lot about educational opportunities. So I guess more so if you want to dig into a little bit about the actual business and how that all got started, that'd be great to hear.
Yeah, sure. So on the educational side of things, like I said, I mean, it was literally a stroke of luck. I mean, as before before a football game, you go up and introduce yourself to the opposing athletic trainer. And I went up to the guy. I mean, this was literally like 4 games into my graduate assistantship at the school, and I went to go say hey, and he's like, "Hey, I know who you are," and I'm in like an area I'd never been in before, so I was like, kind of caught me off guard, and he's like, "I just did a workshop at your dad's high school because my dad's an AD at the high school I went to," and he's like, "My name's Tim." And literally within 2 minutes of meeting, he's pitching me this business idea. He's like, "I've been trying to get somebody to hop on this with me for 20 years. Nobody wanted to do it." And like, long story short, like, he built up this business literally from the ground up, where he's teaching all these coaches these seminars that I mean, they have to have the certification, so like the need is there. And again, some of the bigger organizations have things that they can fill that need as well. But he built this from the ground up over the past 20 years, and he's driving tens of thousands of miles, going to schools in the middle of nowhere, talking to conferences, and it was just pretty cool. So I just started kind of traveling around with him, learning the content, learning how he delivers the content, because he's just an old school entrepreneur. Like, he loves what he does, so it was cool to learn from him. So I learned the content, started teaching a couple classes on my own, and we basically came up with a figure. I forget how we came up with it, but it was basically like, he's like, "Todd, I know you're a grad student. You probably don't have that 30 grand laying around to buy this portion of the company, so you can work 28. I forget what 28 or 30 workshops for free to pay off your part of the company." So I basically just worked for free for 2 years for him, and I got my portion of the company that way, just through a lot of free work, and thousands of miles of driving, and in the middle of nowhere, getting lost all the time, hitting deer, and just, a lot of bumps along the road, literally and figuratively. But it was a great experience, and I'm still doing that a lot of time. Most of the ones that I do are in the summer and in the early winter. So the way that we batch them around like sports seasons. So like, if
That
coaches are
makes
going
sense.
into the winter, yeah, if coaches are going into the winter or the summer and they need certification, that's kind of when we batch them around. So that's kind of how it all started. I never planned on being an entrepreneur. I never really knew what an entrepreneur was until grad school, and that kind of got my feet wet into it. And then I kind of branched off into the hands-on stuff in the gym
Mhm.
and whatnot. So
So then in your like kind of current business setup,
mhm.
is it really mainly doing these courses and then building this kind of gym side of it? I'm gonna just dive in. Like, do you own the
Yeah.
gym? Are you contracted through the gym? Are you still working as a athletic trainer in other
Mhm.
facets, or how does this all come together currently?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I didn't really cover that in the background too well, so that's that's a good question. Um, yeah, so currently I do work at a secondary school, so I do work at a high
Okay.
school right now. I'm employed through Akron Children's Hospital. I work at a small high school. It's got the M on my hat right
Yep.
now at Mogador, and I love it there. It's real small. It's, I mean, by far the smallest school I've ever been at. They got like 200 kids from 7 to 12, grade 7 to 12,
Wow.
so super small. But it's cool, one of those small, like, super good football towns, like
Yep.
a bunch of state championships. So it's pretty cool. So I work there in the daytime, and that's really the one thing that I've fallen in love with the secondary school, as well as the schedule. like, I'm like, hey, like I don't got to go until 1:30 or 2 o'clock. So I have, from whenever I get up in the morning, which is usually pretty early, all day until I go to the school to, do whatever I need to business wise. Um, Currently right now, it's kind of, it's funny and not funny, mostly not funny. I'm not doing my business right now. I've just moved back to where I'm at now in the Akron area. I was in Southeast Ohio for about 9 years. And I haven't been able to find a physician yet and then I'm sure we'll get into this at some
Yep.
point. But I haven't been able to find the right physician to build my business back up here, because there's a ton of legalities and stuff that obviously we have to go through to be able to legally do what we're doing in the entrepreneur realm. So, but I ran the business out of Columbus, a gym in Columbus, for about 2.5 years, and had a physician down there. It was actually my team doc from the high school that I worked at when I was in Southeast Ohio. And yeah, I ran it out of old school gym. I trained there. We had a 4 a.m. crew. This is kind of off topic, but it just had a crazy group of guys that trained real hard, did some powerlifting and bodybuilding shows, and that was kind of the population that I really enjoyed working with too.
Sure.
I think one, just because I liked that style of training, and I was doing it, so I knew what kind of stresses those guys were putting their bodies through. So that's mainly the population that I work with in the time that I was there doing that. But I wouldn't say typically that's the only population I would work with. And that's something I'm still kind of trying to narrow down, which is one of the hardest parts of, in my opinion, of being an entrepreneur, is trying to find your target audience and your niche. It's pretty tough. So, but yeah, so right now I've been in the physician hunt for, it pains me to say this, about 9 months.
Okay.
Because what I found is, and I'm sure people listening to this who've been in the same situation can relate. In Southeast Ohio, it's a little bit more rural, kind of old school. There's a lot more independent doctors there. So if it's an independent doctor, you don't have to worry about all the red tape of a big hospital organization to go through. Like, if you're the doctor, I can say, hey, I have this idea. Would you be my physician? I obviously have a contract and all that, but you can make the decision right then and there. Here in Akron, a little bit more suburban. There's more cities around here. There's not very many independent doctors. So I have to go through the hospital organizations for that if I want to get an MD or a DO. Ohio's Practice Act, again, getting into the more legality side of things.
Sure.
Ohio's Practice Act is pretty lenient. Not lenient, but we have more options. So we can actually use a doctor of chiropractic, a doctor of physical therapy, and as crazy as it sounds, a dentist. So those are the options that we have to look for our standing orders physician here in Ohio. I'd like to stick to an MD or a DO just for the referral base and that. But I have reached out to some chiropractors that I trust around here. They're really good. So I'm trying to keep my options open for the time being. But being picky has led me to be waiting around for a long time, which is good and bad. I'm doing things in the meantime to help build my business and build systems so I can make it more sustainable long term. Which maybe we can talk about that later too, because I've done a million things wrong, probably done 1 or 2 things right along the way. But yeah, it's a constant journey of trying to figure out, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? How can I fix what I'm doing wrong? So, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I was, really very curious about the licensure stuff and like the practicing physician and whatnot. So just kind of diving into that just a little bit more. How does that conversation go? Because I know for my personal right now, like our team physician that I work with at the university I'm at is awesome. And if I were to go out on my own, like he'd figure out a way to still like be over the top of it, even though he's part of a bigger health system. Like he would work with that, and just because we built that relationship. But do you run into like, are they looking for a cut because they're you're going underneath their license, or just how does some of those conversations seem to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the biggest thing is liability. Hey, you're going to be under my wing. You're going to be practicing under my standing orders. What are you doing? What services are you providing? Are you practicing within your scope? Are you doing anything crazy? what type of people are you working with? Are you trying to work with like acute post-op patients, or are you just doing, quote unquote normal rehabs?
Right.
I have had the financial conversations, of course, more with the doctors around here. I was very lucky with the guy that I worked with in Southeast Ohio. He was older, had no interest in the financial aspect of things. He's like, "Hey man, like you go for it. Like I'm here to support you if you need me." Um,
That's awesome.
but do your thing. Yeah, so, I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better scenario. But
Sure.
looking back on it, it made me very naive, and I was like, "Oh, this is easy. I'll move home and get one in 2
Right.
weeks." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it did kind of blind me a little bit to how hard it actually was. But the financial aspect definitely pops up. That's something you definitely need to be, thinking about ahead of time. And in the conversations I've had with other athletic trainers that are doing what I'm doing at a much higher level than I was doing it when I was practicing near Columbus, is you want to try to figure out as many problems ahead of time that the physician's already thinking about, and have
Sure.
solutions to those problems before you approach them. So you're not caught off guard. You don't have to keep going back and forth.
Right.
So yeah, the financial aspect is huge. Are you going to give them a percentage per patient? Are you going to pay them per month? So on and so forth. So those are all things you want to have in the back of your head. And then the liability is a big one too. I mean, you got to have, I pay a lot more in liability insurance for that reason than I'm sure, when I was just doing the regular secondary school stuff, I was paying like $250 a month, and now I'm paying close to $1,000. Not a month. I mean a year. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, not a month, but paying close to $1,000 a year for liability insurance. But again, that's worst case scenario, of course. But
Right.
to kind of give the peace of mind, especially to the physician, that's there in place. So in terms of like gym, like you asked about the gym earlier.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't own the space or anything that I had. I worked out of a like I said, a kind of a powerlifting gym.
Sure.
They had like a wrestling room in the back, and that was literally my office. So if you look through my Instagram and you see me working on a green mat, that was my office.
Perfect.
But it was cool, when we had Tupac blaring and I was doing rehab at 4 a.m. It was crazy, but it was fun. And that probably wouldn't work in every setting, but with with the population that I was working with, it was perfect. Um, in going forward, I mean, I've heard a lot of people say to kind of stay away from trying to have your own space, at least for a while, because it is a lot of overhead financially.
Yep.
Long term, I want to have my own place, and the more that I look into it, I want to be able to build systems to be able to scale it, and have multiple locations long term. I mean, that's the goal. But again, I got to start with one, and that's where I'm heading. I just got to get that position, and it's frustrating because I built a good rapport where I was at, and I do want to be in the online space too, online rehab programming.
Yep.
Because I think there's a lot, especially with all the COVID stuff, like telemedicine's taking a huge jump.
Oh yeah.
So the need is definitely there, and the ability to do it is there. And I have people asking me all the time, like, "Hey, you got a doctor yet? You taking clients?" And I'm like, "No, I wish, but I can't." So that's kind of where I'm at in that regard. But yeah, there's tons of logistics you got to work out. But I mean, just like with anything else, just, you got to reach out to the people who have done it. Like, if you're familiar with Mike Stella, like he's from New York and he's
Yep.
killing it.
Yep.
He's got the movement underground. He's a pioneer in this kind of realm. Andy Fortuna out of I think Miami, Florida. He's a pioneer in this field. Like, he's doing super well. Sean and Jace out of Arizona. They have their practice called Root Sports Med. Trying to think of some others, but I mean, I'm a part of a couple groups, and I feel fortunate to be a part of those, because it's just a lot of forward-thinking athletic trainers kind of in this
Sure.
space, troubleshooting things and whatnot. So there's always help if you know where to look.
Kind of going back to the licensure stuff, do you or have you looked into, because it's its own rabbit hole, looked at potential for license laws changing and pushing forward, and whether it needs to be that you go and get like a DAT just so you are considered that doctorate level, or even just, I know in Wisconsin there's been some like chatter about eventually moving us just out from underneath physicians in general, as we're getting recognized by, the AMA and everything with what we are. So is that anything you've looked into? That's its own black hole, I feel like, if you were, but
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, who knows what the field's going to look like here in 10 years? Um, I mean, there's definitely going to be a push for DATs, like no doubt. I mean, since we're moving to entry level masters now, I mean, the DAT is going to be important just for us to have professors to teach in those programs.
yep,
I've looked a little bit into the DAT. The one that I'm always seeing on Twitter is Indiana State University. Kent Games is
yep,
always very active on there. He seems like a great guy, and I've talked to him a little bit about it. I did look into a little bit. This was before I was looking more into a DAT, but I was like, if I got a PhD and I was considered a doctor of whatever,
yep,
would that be like, would I need standing orders? And after doing a lot of research, I still would have needed a physician. So I did look into that. I actually applied and got accepted to run a research project with the Department of Defense, and I actually got offered the job and everything. It was a really cool project, but it would have been 5 years, and with the money and time involved, it just didn't seem right. Just with what within the line with what I wanted to do. So it was really hard to turn down because it was a great opportunity, but it just wasn't right for me. So to shortly answer your question, a DAT or a PhD would not change anything right now. But like I said, in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, I mean, who knows? I mean,
right,
in 5 years, it could be synonymous like with a DPT, and
right.
these they can practice independently. So who's to say in 7 years a DAT can't practice independently? So I hope we get there, because I think we our profession as a whole deserves that recognition. And I mean, we're completely capable, you know what I mean, with all the skills that we have. So
I agree. One of the questions I had, and we can kind of tie it into something you mentioned earlier, was
mhm.
just the skills that you've had to build in order to, grow a successful business. And then you also mentioned systems that you're putting into place and the mistakes that have been made. I haven't run my own business, but running a department, like I've come around to that, and it's just like systematize almost everything you can short of patient care, just
Yep.
to make sure that it's always running the same. And getting staff on board with that has been its own unique experience. So I'm just curious as to what you've seen.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's where my biggest mistake was when I was at that gym and all those guys I was training with. Um, I mean, our main guy in the crew was Corey Gregory. If anybody's listening, if anybody's familiar with Muscle Farm, he was the founder of Muscle Farm.
Okay, I was gonna say I knew the
Um,
name.
yeah. And so yeah, I mean, he's almost, he's in the fitness realm as high as entrepreneur as you can get. So, and he was kind of pushing me, hey, like, where your passion's at, find a way to make it work. And I found a way to make it work and literally just jumped right into it, which was good and bad. I had a lot of fun. I learned a lot, but I also did so much wrong. Like I alluded to earlier, I didn't set up any type of business systems. I didn't really have very much business acumen at all. And it came back to bite me, just in terms of like logistical stuff. Like, I didn't know how to do, taxes and, all that kind of the really boring stuff that you don't want to do for a business. But the systems were huge because, and I mean, literally, I didn't really realize how important they were until probably a couple months ago. And that was one of the things in terms of, learning and the business development for myself during the COVID time. I've been reading a lot of books, um, trying to be, well-rounded in the types of books that I've been reading. A lot of self-development, personal development, mental toughness, mindset stuff. But I have read a couple books on systems, and I joined a coaching academy. It's mostly physical therapy. I'm sorry, personal trainers. There is one chiropractor in there that I saw, but it's all about learning how to build your business from the ground up. So, and that's what I was alluding to earlier with, I can't practice my business right now, but I've been doing a lot on the back end, so I can make it more sustainable once I get it up and running again. So I'm learning how to I identify my ideal client, how to automate a little bit of the systems in terms of like, emailing and marketing and advertising, and how to tie in client testimonials in back into email marketing and all that stuff. Um, and then just overall systems in general, in terms of how to make, like you said, how can people don't pay for the actual service, they pay for the experience, and they pay for the clinician, right? So how can I make that the most reproducible every single time? So every time a patient comes to me, obviously their care is going to be individualized, but I want their experience to be almost the same every time. So then they know what they're getting from me. So when I advertise to somebody else, they know exactly what they're going to get. And when I was doing it, and again, it wasn't that it was like ragtag, just throwing stuff together, throwing it at the wall, but it just wasn't the same exact thing every single time. So, and because when you don't have the systems, it's impossible to do that, and it's impossible to scale. Which, like I said, that's one of my goals. You can't scale a business that doesn't have systems. So,
Right. No, that makes complete sense. Any other missteps that you're like, man, can't believe I did that?
I would say not so much business wise, but for a long time, I was just trying to kind of keep up with everybody else. Whether it was, oh, like they're doing this on Instagram, like, should I get that certification, or should I try
Mhm.
this technique, or what I'm doing is not good enough. You know what I mean? So I just got caught up for a little while and not thinking that what I was doing was good enough. Although like the results I've seen with patients were great, I was like, why am I not doing that? Am I not good enough, or am I not innovative enough? Or it's just so like a lot of self doubt. I would say, which is good and bad. Again, it makes you, you're constantly self auditing and seeing where you're at. But sometimes that can cause paralysis by analysis too, which you don't want as a business person, because you need to be decisive and make decisions to move your business forward, or else you're going to be staying in place. So
Yeah, it gets tough, especially when you see all the certifications and stuff out there and everything everybody's done. Like, I
yeah,
know if I had the budget, I would do like endless, mainly just because I want to see everything and
yeah,
hear everything and look at it differently. But yeah, there are definitely times where it's just kind of like, man, so and so's done all of this, and I can't even get
I
past
know
this. And that's can be its own unique
it can be
self
overwhelming
conversation.
for
Yeah.
sure.
How do you balance, I guess, um, all the things that you bring? You mentioned evaluation, a lot of your pictures, you're doing soft tissue work, and different things. How do you balance when you were doing it and how you would like to see it going forward, of keeping with what you know and believe to work versus what the patient thinks or believes
Hmm.
is also going to work? Because obviously that's an important piece of it. And I feel like in the setting that you want to work in, like, you want to make your clients happy so they can keep coming back and they say good things
Sure.
about you. In the secondary school setting, if you don't do exactly what the kid wants, he's probably still going to come back the next day because you're really his only option.
Yep.
So you might be able to control that in a little different way. So how do
Hmm.
you have you balanced that, or do you foresee balancing that going forward?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. My and like you said there, I do have a lot of pictures of soft tissue work, and that's probably probably a little bit of a misrepresentation of what I do. Um, because we had a photographer at the gym, and he would kind of pop in some, here and there, and usually it was at the end of my sessions when I would be doing a lot of the soft tissue work. More is kind of like the cherry on top almost, and because he was shooting people in the gym. But I I, I mean, in my business logo, my tagline is "Heal by Moving." I have it copyrighted, and that's kind of the basis for everything that I do. I truly believe that movement is medicine, and our bodies were made to move, and movement is the best. Movement is the best diagnostic tool. It's the best healer for the body and for the mind, and that's kind of how I approach it. I do some soft tissue stuff, but I firmly believe that unless you're taking an active approach to healing, you're not going to have the long-term effects of a successful rehab. You can do all the massage, all the manual therapy, all the Graston, all the dry needling, all the stuff that's out there, but if you're not learning how to load that tissue safely and how to retrain your gait, or anything, doing an overhead press correctly where you're fully locked out and you got full internal rotation in your shoulder, you you're not going to have the best results long term. Like, you may feel better today if I massage your shoulder, but if you don't know how to load a barbell properly and stack your core and get tight and create torque in your shoulders, like, just because that made you feel better today doesn't mean in 2 weeks you're not going to be feeling the same way.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
No, I
So
like how you said that.
yeah, so I definitely balance it. Like I said, I view manual therapy more as kind of the cherry on top. Like, I have a hypervolt gun, and I'll use that at the end. If somebody worked their butt off and had a great rehab, and they're feeling kind of sore, fatigued, or tired, like, I'll run that over their quad or hamstring or glute or whatever, at the end. But that's the 1% of the and again, it's probably the most seen on Instagram, which
Right.
probably isn't the best thing. But that's probably like 1% of what I'm actually doing. So yeah, movement is by far where I base how I think about rehab and about just sports medicine in general. And I just did a talk this morning with some high school kids. Like, I mean, movement trickles over into life, how you view things, your mentality, your health. I mean, everything. So that's where I'm at.
Sounds good. Advice you'd have for people that are potentially thinking about going out on their own, either jumping in full go or even looking at kind of a part-time, kind of see
Mhm.
how it goes scenario. What would be, I don't know, a couple good pieces of advice? I'm sure that's something you could talk for hours on, as you went through all the process steps, but
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, I mean, number one, you can't be afraid to try. Like, if you're truly passionate about it, um, you know, I mean, regret's one of the biggest things that I think about in life that I don't want to have. So if I fail, then I know that I at least tried. I don't plan on failing, but if you never try, you don't know. But in the same sense, knowing what I know now, I would have done a little bit more research and education on the business side of things, and asked more questions to more people beforehand. Um, you know, Rewind 4 or 5 years, I had a little bit of an issue. I guess you could call it an ego issue, but not in the sense that it was cockiness. It was more afraid to be wrong, or afraid to be seen as not knowing. So I
mhm,
didn't ask questions, because I didn't want people to think, oh, that's a stupid question.
sure.
So our ego definitely gets in the way of things, whether it's cockiness or whether it's out of fear. And so you got to make sure, again, going back to kind of being self-aware and self-auditing yourself, like, hey, am I not asking this question because I don't need to know the answer, or it's because I don't want to be seen as being dumb or being wrong?
Right.
So making sure you're asking the right people the right questions. Going out and, I mean, a couple things that I did that really helped, where I went to some chiropractic office, some people who were self-employed, physical therapists, personal trainers even, and just watched how they worked. Like, what do I like that they do? What do I not like that they do? And so I kind of get some real world experience in, how do I want to structure how I practice and how I communicate with patients, and all that type of thing. So getting out and talking to people who are doing what you want to do is key. And then educating yourself where you're weak, for sure. Those are probably my two biggest things, because if you don't know where you're weak, you're going to find yourself in trouble. And that's kind of where I found myself, not in trouble, but just really far behind the eight ball in terms of the business side of things. But I would say definitely the worst thing is not trying at all, whether it's out of fear or whether it's because of the unknown. Like, you got to dive in, but you got to do it smart.
Makes sense. Anything else around entrepreneurship and athletic training that we didn't cover that you would like to?
Um, I would say, I don't know. I mean, we covered quite a bit. I would just say, I mean, and this goes really with anything, just be a lifelong learner. I mean, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So just
Isn't that the
always,
truth?
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's kind of depressing, but it's fun at the same time.
I once thought, I was like, man, maybe it isn't this complex. Like maybe we just start, stick with the basics, and you know,
Yeah,
the, just they seem to work, and then it would get into a little bit more. And I was like, well, that theory doesn't work. Like
ex-
it's too complex.
it's
And
like going back and forth between like, oh yeah, like I have a pretty good grasp on this, and then the very next day I'm like,
oh,
I don't even know how to rehab an ankle. You know what I mean? Like it's just like,
yeah, I've had conversations with people. You just walk out of it, and I'll say to somebody else, be like, "So what'd you do today?" Because I didn't do anything compared to
yeah,
what so and so just did. Are you kidding me? Like, what are we doing?
exactly,
So
exactly. So yeah, I mean that's probably the biggest thing is just, I mean, if it's something you're interested in, go check it out. If it doesn't provide any value to you or you don't feel like it's useful, then discard it. But find the next thing, and I mean, know what your core values are. Like, know where you stand. I mean, every business I believe should have a core set of values that they stand by, and they really don't change. But you can develop, whether it's techniques or rehab protocols or um, I mean, certifications or something. If you can add things to add to your toolbox without kind of diluting it, I think like you said with all the certifications out there, you can kind of dilute what you have and what you know, almost to the point where it's like, well, I have this certification, this certification, this certification, this certification. Like, how am I going to fit all that into an hour rehab session or an hour treatment session? To the point where it's almost overwhelming. So, um, you know, I don't have a ton of certifications, but I've done a lot more learning and research than what you could see in the certifications. But
right,
it's to me, it's not about that. It's about, can I find something that's going to help my patients more? If it does, sweet, I'll add it. If not, then I'll discard it.
yep,
And it's just that continual refining process of your skills. So
couldn't agree more. With that, ready to hop into those athletic training chat questions?
let's do it.
Awesome. You kind of referenced this earlier, but we'll let you really hammer it down. Is where do you see the athletic training profession going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, the profession as a whole could look completely different here in 10 years. With, and I would have answered this probably the same 4 months ago, but even now, 100 times more. With entrepreneurship, I think we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years a lot more people going that route, because I think before we've gotten around this time, there's a lot of people kind of burn out or fed up with the profession, and we're like, well, I don't want to work in a high school, a college, a pro team, um, or even an industrial setting. So I'm just going to go get a new degree, or go and get into real estate, or
Right.
whatever.
Selling insurance.
But yeah, yeah, but with all these new options out there, like if you like rugby, go find the rugby club that just got formed, and be the athletic trainer for their league, or for their conference or whatever.
Hmm.
Or like kind of what in the realm that I'm in, like find a physician, find a gym, and if it's a clientele that you want to work with, go work with them. Like, there's so many options out there now, and it's only going to continue to grow. And the nice thing is, it's kind of a gray area, so you can kind of experiment a little bit with it. I'm not telling anybody to break any laws, of course, but I mean, you can kind of dip your toes into the water, for lack of a
Sure.
better term, to see what you like. I mean, that's the beauty of, really anything. I talk to my wife about this all the time, but she's considering a career change. Like, go find something that you enjoy, and go observe them for a weekend, or a couple days, and just see what you think. Like, if you hate it, don't go back, find something else. If you love it, go back and see how they work a little bit more. Just, you can do that with anything in our profession. Even if it's like, oh, I don't know, I'm trying to think. And there's just so many options out there. It's virtually endless. If you're passionate about a certain area, and there's a way to make it work, which there usually is, um, there's really no reason that you can't do it. So
With
I think, and then with all the COVID stuff, job security is at an all-time low. I mean, there's athletic training jobs getting cut left and right because we're not seen as a necessity, which is
Yep.
absurd and a conversation for another day. But
Yep.
we've got to take it on ourselves to advocate for our value, and and that's another thing too. I truly believe that we're going to see some of that old model come back to where we're either employed by the schools again, like in the secondary school setting. I think we're going to go towards that again, or, and this is a conversation we're having in our Innovate Athletic Training group, is even finding stakeholders outside of the high school in the community that will pay for an athletic trainer for the school.
Yep.
Because it's just absurd that these kids don't have access to healthcare. And I mean, especially like right now, like these kids haven't been doing anything for 3 months, and you want to get them right back into sport and do. I saw on Twitter there was a football team doing Murph, like for football.
Good.
Like what? You know what I mean? Like these kids need access to healthcare. How are they going to get it? Like
Right.
we can't complain. We can't complain about long work hours and not getting paid enough. Like, what are we going to do to fix it? How are we going to infiltrate that system or change the system to get those kids healthcare, get us the value and financially that we want and that we deserve? We got to find a way. We just can't sit back and complain about it. You know what I mean? So I think there's going to be a big shift. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I don't think it's going to look like anything like what it does now in 10 years.
I don't have a hard time picturing that either. What advice would you go back and give yourself as a younger athletic trainer? And if you could kind of set the stage of when that would be in your career, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm going into my 6th year. Well, I count my 2 years in grad school as being a professional because I was literally by myself at a high school.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So
you were
yeah,
certified, you were up and running.
yeah, yeah. So some people don't count that, but whatever.
You got paid
So I'm
like
going.
a grad
Yeah,
student.
exactly. Yeah. Other than the pay, it was a normal job. I'm going into my 6th year of professional athletic training. So to set the stage, I guess me being a young athletic trainer would be either my first year working, which would have been 2015, or even a little bit before that when I was still a student, so like 2013, 2014. Just like what I said before, honestly, is not being afraid to ask questions. Like I was petrified of being wrong. I think that's kind of a symptom of the educational system about not wanting to be wrong and getting punished if you're wrong, whether it's on a test or whatever. And I just didn't want to be wrong, so I wasn't asking questions, so I wasn't learning as much. I wasn't getting the answers that I needed, but it was my fault because I wasn't asking the questions. So
Right.
like, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody's gonna make fun of you. Like if somebody makes fun of you for asking a question, that says way more about them than it does about you because you're trying to
Sure.
learn.
Yep.
So that's definitely the biggest piece of advice I would give to young Todd.
Fair enough. What has been the most influential resource that you found in your career thus far?
That's a great question. Influential resource. I would say, and this isn't like a super traditional answer in terms of like education. I would say that my time at that gym that I was at and just being exposed to entrepreneurs, because
Okay.
if I wouldn't have been exposed to the entrepreneurs like Corey Gregory and a couple of those other guys, um, I probably wouldn't be doing this because, yeah, I mean, maybe I would, I don't know, with how things are going, but I don't, I would have been way behind. So
Yeah, I hear you.
just being exposed to entrepreneurs and reading books. I mean, honestly, I was talking to this with the kids this morning, like learning is cool. Reading is cool. Wanting to improve yourself is cool. Like all the resources are out there. So whether it's books, podcasts, people themselves, mentors, like go find those people out or go find those resources out because they're out there. You just gotta, know what you want and, search for that. So
Absolutely. If you could change or eliminate one thing, it could be modality, a common practice, a mindset, or whatever else you'd like to choose in the field of athletic training, what would it be?
rice.
Fantastic.
That it's
Love
my
it.
big Oh man, I could rant about that for days.
Yeah.
If I have a negative, 'cause I'm probably most of the time overly optimistic about things and very positive and stuff. But man, rice really gets my gears going because again, going back to what I said earlier about passive versus active and how you treat things, like
Yep.
and it's still being taught in schools, like on the curriculum, the curriculum guide that we were supposed to follow for our coaching courses, like for musculoskeletal stuff, they have a rice chapter in there. I'm like, I'm not teaching rice. Nope,
Yeah. Yeah. I hear
no
you.
chance.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's been something I had that phase shift 4 or 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Is when it really hit for me, where it started with the Kelly Starrett video with Gary Renal, just
Hmm.
talking about it, and it's kind of like, huh, that actually makes some sense. And it's been
Yeah.
like a slow and steady battle, and still trying to get even some coworkers to just be like, just challenge yourself on it. I'm not saying you got to change it,
Yeah.
but just at least challenge yourself. And it's come around where we tried to make people less passive, like you said,
Yes.
in their recovery. So no, that's
And
awesome.
getting coaches on board, that is
Oh
super
man,
hard.
yeah, because
Super hard.
that's always the thing. Oh, just go put some ice on it.
Yep.
Well, no.
Yeah.
The most recent one I've been battling is anytime somebody's hamstring is tight, that we just have to go and stretch their hamstring. That's the
Uh,
solution. My hamstring's really tight. I feel like I might pull it. Can you stretch it? Well, let's just pump the brakes here a second, guys. Like,
why is it tight? Why is
hold,
it tight?
hold on. Yeah. Because if it's already tight, like, do we really want to just keep cranking on it? Um,
Exactly.
anyway, maybe that's a follow-up episode. Common misconceptions that we're trying to break down. Finally, then, what does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
Like I said at the beginning, I mean, the reason I got into this was to help people in the situation that I was in when I was a young kid and hurt and down in the dumps because I couldn't do something that I loved, and that's really kind of like my personal why statement is helping guide others to live life without limitation.
Okay.
And and that I created that kind of statement in my head for the physical aspect, but it goes with the physical and the mental aspect too, because it's not just the body that's in need of care when an injury occurs. It's also the mind. It's you have the depression and the isolation of not being around your friends and not doing something you love, and your routine's all messed up because you're not going to practice, or you're not training. And um so I mean, it means the world to me. It's being able to be there for somebody in the time of vulnerability and time of need, and be able to help them get through that. Even if it's just they're having a bad rehab day and just somebody there to talk to. I feel very fortunate that I'm in the position I'm in to be able to help people like that. So.
Sounds great. Anything else you wanted to share? And then also, if people wanted to follow you or your business or anything that you're doing, what would those best options be?
Anything else I want to share? I think we covered quite a bit. So other than being a lifelong learner, I think that's my biggest takeaway message, I guess. You can never know enough, and if you stop trying to learn, then you're in trouble.
Right.
That's kind of my last thing. So, where can people find me? On Twitter and Instagram, it's at Todd SportsMed, and then Facebook is just Todd Sabol. But I'm typically pretty active on Twitter and Instagram. So,
Perfect.
and then sportsmeddiscussion.com, like you said, is the website. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
yeah, thanks for having me on, man.